Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
All right. Hi, everyone. This is Kerim with Solar Academy again. And today I'm here with Sean White. Everyone in the solar industry pretty much knows Sean White. He's one of the oldest names in solar education, training, certification for NAPSET and beyond. And we're going to talk a little bit about everything relating to solar storage and our missions with Solar Academy and what Sean does all around the US and the world with his educational initiatives, courses, and everything else. So, Sean, thank you.
Thanks so much, Kerim. And I also want to welcome everybody to my podcast because I'm going to post this on my podcast. So
as well,
Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. So welcome everybody to the podcast. We're going to double post this. Another thing I thought it was just kind of interesting is how we kind of met I used to teach classes, I think it was around 2008, 9, 10, or I guess mostly probably 2009, I think. And there was a big feed-in tariff in Ontario, Canada. And I was teaching classes for Ontario Solar Academy. And they had the URL for solaracademy.com. And every once in a while, I don't know, I just enter that into the URL and I saw somebody else was doing something with it. And so I sent an email and here we are. And then we ended up having a lot of people that we knew in common. And somehow we were on a call, was it 2 weeks ago, with Nico Johnson, who's now going to end up being on my podcast. And Nico has his own Suncast podcast that a lot of people have heard of. And he does a whole bunch of podcasting. He's like a full-time podcaster, I guess. And then also Brian Hayden from HeatSpring was on the call. So you already knew them. And so we just ended up hanging out on the Zoom, hooking some things up. And so here we are. And I thought that's pretty cool. And you got the solaracademy.com from the guy that ran the Ontario Solar Academy. Which was sort of like a gold rush. There was an incentive, this feed-in tariff. So what it was is people that installed solar would get a 20-year contract. In fact, the feed-in tariff was first invented by Hermann Scher in Germany. He's a German politician. And recently, I actually had a podcast with a friend of Hermann Scher because we couldn't get Hermann because he passed away. His name is Enki Weber. And we were talking all about feed-in tariffs. And so it really kickstarted the solar industry. It was a 20-year contract. And so if some of these projects, say, were started in 2010, they're going on to get paid until 2030 at 80.2 cents per kilowatt hour. That's what the price was.
When I got familiar with the Ontario market, which was around 2012, the 80 cents price was for residential and 40 some cents for utility.
Yeah,
was that
44.
the same prices that you're referring to? So they did not go down from 2009 to 12. I don't know if it did or not. So I'm just curious if utility was even higher before then, but probably not.
Yeah, and the feed-in tariffs have gone down dramatically, just like the price of solar. And originally they were set up, I think it was, so that people that invested in solar would get a return on investment, something like 9% is just kind of the goal that they were trying to set up.
I mean, it depended on how much margin was being made in the whole construction process, because you can price the final price to the ultimate buyer, which generally is a big insurance company or some pension fund that holds that asset for 20 years or 18 years. Because generally the way those assets were built were there would be probably 2, 3, 4 different owners from the origination of the solar development project to the finishing of the project. And once it was finished and operational and had 1 or 2 good years of data, then the big owners, the big asset owners would hold them for a 9-10% return. But of course, the pricing for those projects, I mean, there was so much margin in all stages of development, whether it was early stage up to NTP, up to COD, or, during the EPC process also, like it was just a high margin environment. And that's why actually I was looking into the Canadian market back then, because in 2009 is when I entered the solar industry after having been an internet entrepreneur and tech industry worker prior to that. And we had built Civic Solar, which was kind of like an Amazon marketplace.
Yeah, I remember that, Civic Solar. So you're the one that started that?
I was one of the 3 co-founders,
Great.
With my 2 co-founders, Michael Goldberg and Michael Paler. We started Civic Solar in 2009 and ran it and grew it to about 70 employees until 2019. And then we sold it to our largest brick and mortar competitor, CED Greentech or Greentech.
Oh, CED bought Civic Solar.
That's right, in
And you
2009.
made billions, so you're a billionaire. That's cool.
I actually made more money from my first venture, which was one of the earliest social networks in the world.
Are you
Started
Tom from MySpace? Is that your nickname?
I was essentially, I don't know if you know the Bebo.com, which was kind of the MySpace for the UK Irish market, but it
Oh
was
yeah.
ran from San Francisco, interestingly, because
Huh.
it was another tech entrepreneur
Lots of
residing in.
Irish people there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was kind of like the Bebo of Turkey. Again,
Mhm.
ran from San Francisco, and we were kind of the Friendster MySpace equivalent for the Turkish
Uh-huh.
market. For a while, we were the largest Turkish website in page views.
Wow.
Yeah, we had millions of young
So
Turks
what
as
happened to that?
we sold it to essentially the equivalent of Yahoo of Turkey, because at some point we surpassed their page views, and it was a defensive move for them and their primary investor, Tiger Global, which is a big hedge fund slash private equity and tech investor out of New York. So after that exit, actually, is when I said to myself, okay, I made good enough money now that I can just follow my heart into something that has more social impact and less
Uh-huh.
monetary.
So you got into solar.
Yeah, and then I
Hmm.
got into solar. Civic
Yeah.
Solar exit was okay. We didn't lose investors' money. I think we had huge impact in the world and in the world of distributed and resi and small commercial solar in the US market mostly, but also beyond. And it was a great experience. For a decade. We educated essentially, not in the way you educate, but we educated in a slightly different way. Essentially, we handheld them to do their first few projects, and then hopefully kept them as loyal customers to keep buying panels, inverters, and all the other related equipment from us. So the kind of education we were doing was a little bit more like a value-added reseller education, educating electrical contractors, general contractors, HVAC contractors, and the like about which panels to buy, which panels work with which inverters, how to properly size a system,
So where was
bill of
Civic
material.
Solar?
I don't know if you know the Hobart building right at the intersection of 2nd and Market in San Francisco downtown,
Oh,
right above the Fidelity and the Citibank at the corner.
I think sorta.
Yeah,
Yeah.
at this point, it's a 110-year-old building. I think it was
Hmm.
completed in 2014. I mean, 1914 was when the build was
That must have
officially
been
open.
some expensive real estate. And then when did you
No, it was a Class B building. It was not one of those Class A buildings. So we were paying when we
Second and
first started.
Market? That's pretty downtown there, right?
Well, yeah, nowadays it's super cheap down there because it's zombie land if you've been to San Francisco downtown.
And did you say you sold in 2019? Is that what you said?
So I built two companies in that building in San Francisco. My prior social networking business, I also started it. It's a 20-story old Spanish style high rise for its era. In 1914, when that building, Hobart building, was finished, it was the tallest building in San Francisco with 20 stories. And at its 100-year anniversary at 2014, I was its second oldest tenant, having been in the building for 10 years.
Mhm.
And a lot of the tenants were small companies, small practitioners of therapists and accountants and, small businesses. But then every once in a while you would get some cool startups. And we actually, at some point, we had the full floor of the 16th. And then things were getting really hot with the whole Facebook tech economy in San Francisco. This is probably around 2014 or 2015, 16. And at that point, we moved to Oakland. We took over the space of Emily Kirsch's Powerhouse.
Oh,
We
sure.
took one whole floor of that, or one whole wing of a floor. We took it
Okay.
over
Yeah, I'd
from
been there before.
what was the name of the big financing company, residential
Like
financing
Danny
company?
Kennedy,
It,
Sungevity.
no, not Sungevity, the other one. Mosaic Solar is what I'm thinking
Oh,
of.
Mosaic.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
took over Mosaic's
Mhm.
old space, and then we launched also offices in Boston and Austin, Texas. So we had 3 sales offices of approximately 10 to 15 people each in the sales offices. So we had approximately 30 to 40 salespeople serving thousands of small contractor accounts with 3 offices. We almost never met face to face with our customers. And this is the innovation of our business, was really on the business model. We essentially brought a more efficient way to capture customers and to service customers like a distributor with no warehouses. So we had no traveling salesmen. We printed no catalogs. We did everything on the internet. We used Skype video in 2010 to establish rapport with our customers so that we could convince them to wire us, $5, $10, $20,000 without having ever met us in person and without having received the product first. For the first 5 years of our business, we pretty much gave no terms to our customers either, because we would be found by them on the internet. They would be Googling certain products or certain knowledge. They would fall onto our website and see that we knew what we were talking about. We had a really well organized e-commerce website, which is now the Greentech Renewables website, is essentially the old Civic Solar website.
So when they merged, did they take a
Yeah.
lot of your IP and stuff like that?
Yeah, there was some IP in the business, but it was not like a patented IP. It was a lot of organizational IP in terms of how to manage and run and build an internet business.
So are they still doing things that you developed, CED?
What do you mean by developed?
Just like you were saying, all your procedures, like when they bought
Oh, yeah.
Civic Solar, how did that work? I mean, I guess they completely got rid of the Civic Solar brand because I don't see
the
it
Civic
anymore.
Solar brand, unfortunately, got put to the sideline. But, CED is an amazing organization with now, I think, 100 plus solar warehouses and probably 600 plus electrical warehouses. They're a almost 70-year-old organization.
And I think you said that you didn't have warehouses?
Yeah, we did not.
How did that work then? How did you get people equipment?
So that was kind of the magic sauce. In the beginning, we actually partnered with what you would think are our competitors. So I remember going to 2009 SPI, RE Plus now, in Anaheim. And so we went and talked to Canadian Solar and a bunch of other major panel manufacturers. And we said, Sharp, I think at the time, and a couple others, we said, we want to sell your panels. And we're thinking of selling it on the internet. And we had a mock-up e-commerce site. We created a page with their brands and their products. Would you be interested in it if we sold it? They're like, sure, go ahead and sell it. Minimum order size is $1 million. You can buy it and then sell it anywhere you want. We're like, well, I don't know if we want to buy $1 million without knowing anything about the solar business in 2009, is what we initially thought. And then said, is there any other way? And they said, well, you can go work with our master distributors. We're like, okay. So then we went to these master distributors. Actually, we called some of those master distributors. They would not even return our calls. It was so difficult to get quality service and knowledge. But luckily, we did meet a couple of those guys at the trade show and said, would you be interested in, like, if we called you and bought some product from you, would you sell it to us? Or would you drop ship it for us? And they said, yeah. So essentially, in the first 5 years, what we did was mostly generate business and then drop ship it from our competitors. But if the order was big enough, we could have the products drop shipped from the warehouse of the panel manufacturer or the inverter manufacturer, even for big inverter orders and things like that. So we essentially work almost like something of a hybrid of a broker / value-added reseller business model without carrying any inventory for the first 5, 6, 7 years. And then at some point when there was too much demand and not enough supply, it became difficult to secure supply and product. At that point, we started securing some inventory, mostly panels, so that we could use that as the anchor to get some business and then sell the other stuff. So it was more of a bootstrap approach to building carving a 2-3% market share for ourselves in the grand resi and commercial market of solar, which is billions of dollars now. So yeah, that was a 10-year journey, which ended in a nice way with CED Greentech.
Great. Yeah, CED, I'm pretty sure they're the biggest distributor right now. So, and it looks like you have a degree, an MBA from Harvard Business School. So
that's right.
That probably helps open some doors.
Yeah, it did, definitely.
And it looks like an engineering and management degree at Northwestern.
Industrial engineering degree from Northwestern. That was my undergrad. Like I was telling you, I grew up in Turkey and came to the US for college. Came to Chicago without having seen the school. I was accepted and I came with a suitcase in my hand. And
you learned about being cold.
Being cold, that's right. Great winters in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, probably a little different from Istanbul.
Actually, Istanbul gets all 4 seasons. We do get about a couple of weeks of snow every year in Istanbul. Pretty much.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Istanbul is more north than New York and Paris, actually, if you look at it on a latitude basis. But then southern Turkey is kind of like at the same latitude as maybe Florida, Georgia. So we do get nice warm weather on southern Turkey and also on the Aegean coast facing the Greek islands.
Yeah, a lot of history there.
Yeah. And then you might wonder, how did my Solar Academy idea start? And because we were in the business of educating in a VAR style all these contractors, I would observe our sales floor and we would be constantly repeating the same few keys, 2, 3, 4 sentences about each product that we took away from our training, because our vendors, people like Nico from Trina.
And you mean Nico Johnson?
Yeah, Nico Johnson, who used to work for Trina, and all the other major panel manufacturers, inverter manufacturers, racking manufacturers, they would come into our offices. They would send their channel managers or their partner managers or their regional salespeople or trainers or product managers, depending on the company and the role. They would send these people to our office to train our people in person for an hour. We would make sure that every week we would have at least 1 hour of training for our salespeople, account managers. And then the next day I would be on the sales floor and I would hear that whatever was taught in the training the day before, they would be repeating those same, like they would all take away these 2, 3, 4 key sentences and repeat those to the customers, because those were the value propositions of those companies. And I would be thinking, man, what an inefficient way to educate the market. Like we're all repeat. It's like whisper down the lane game we're playing all the time with all these vendors. Why can't we just leverage video? Maybe even capture those 2, 3 sentences from the mouth of the trainer or the product manager of that vendor. We still know a lot more about those products as we work with them day in, day out. But why don't we transfer some of that with video? It would be so much more credible. And also the business model of creating a social network was the fact that the more content you put on a platform, the more people and eyeballs came to it. And so that's how we got our hundreds of customers. We would get approximately 100 plus customers every month for free with zero marketing spend, because we didn't even spend too much money on Google SEO. We did a few SEO tricks, but not too much. We would get all these incoming calls for free because of the fact that we put more information on the web, more than our competitors. Our brick and mortar competitors didn't really have proper websites. We did have some internet-based competitors, like web-based distributor competitors, but we did a slightly better job than them in terms of curating our site and designing it and putting the information. And we really gave great customer service. So I would be thinking, okay, if we put video also, it would make us even stronger. But at the time, there was a lot of resistance to video, and video technologies weren't this readily available and cheap. But then what changed all of this was COVID. When COVID happened, a lot of the B2B conversations shifted from being face-to-face to being on Zoom, as we're doing now. And Zoom became a normal part of life. And it also became really easy to hit record and record a conversation, just like we're doing now. And that kind of told me, okay, now is the time to really do the things that you were thinking of doing at Civic Solar on a new platform to facilitate knowledge flow up and down the value chain across the industry. And that's why I relaunched Solar Academy after COVID, basically to capture these types of conversations so we don't have to repeat ourselves all the time. So we can capture those value proposition sentences once from the mouth of the product manager or the business leader, sales manager, sales leader, marketing leader, and then put it on a platform where it can be captured forever and shared to help their sales and marketing processes, post-sale as well as pre-sale.
Great. So maybe a little bit about the history of solaracademy.com. So I believe that Jacob Travis, who started the Ontario Solar Academy, so it was kind of strange how he started it up too. He went to some Canadian solar meeting and then he just started signing people up for classes and he didn't even have a trainer yet. And then he found me and then I came up there and I was going to hotels. It was just a gold mine. And the thing it didn't last for that long. And because
he ran it for several years, I believe, right?
Yeah, but I think the gold mine part, where I think it was something like he would sell a seat for $3,600 and get 30 or 40 people once a month.
Yeah,
but that didn't last because then all these other people moved into town to do the training, and then a lot of people got trained too, and then it became more cutthroat. I remember Infinite Solar moved up there, and I was teaching for Infinite Solar in Philadelphia, and they saw that it was taking off like crazy. Anyway, during my experience, which was a great experience, I loved working with everybody up there in Canada and Remember, I had a girlfriend up there, and I was probably there like 1 or 2 weeks out of the month for a year. But then all the easy signups for the classes went down. I remember the last class I taught there was like 5 people, and he probably gave him discounts. And he had huge bills because he was renting a big space, and all these people working for him and stuff. And so it's like a gold rush. It went from like a gold mine to the bottom of the solar coaster. We always talk about the solar coaster. And then, I moved on, did different things. And I think he had a couple other trainers. He was trying to like pay less for trainers so he could still make his $100,000 months he was shooting for.
Yeah. I don't know much about that business at that time and the details of what Jacob did, but Jacob has been super helpful to me because in the early years of Civic Solar, we were doing pretty well with our distribution business. And at the time, we said we should also get into solar development so we understand a little bit more about our customers' world and their challenges and their business models. And we started thinking, okay, what do? We definitely don't want to compete with our residential and commercial customers here in the US market. And we looked into developing utility scale solar farms, and then the Canadian market seemed the best because they had those 44 cents, 45-cent feed-in tariffs for 20 years. And then I started poking around that market, Googling information, searching on LinkedIn. And that's how I met Jacob. And Jacob connected us to, at the time, a young, probably Michael Zimmerman, who was at the time probably in his late 20s, early 30s, former investment banker, quit his investment banking job and started some solar development projects in the Ontario region. And with him, we developed 2+ megawatts of solar utility solar farms, 3 of them. And that's how we became partners with Michael Zimmerman of Group for Solar in the Canadian market. And Jacob was essentially the person that introduced us. So he has been a very helpful person to me. And in that whole 2 years of Canadian adventures, where we developed these solar farms, I kept in touch with Jacob. I would see him, not at every trip, but maybe every other or every third trip that I would do to make to Canada from California. And at some point, we were talking about education and what my Solar Academy vision that was really sparking from my Civic Solar experience. And at the time, actually, Jacob had the solaracademy.com URL. I did not even know that. I searched for solaracademy.com. It wasn't available. So I bought solaracademy.com and started tinkering on that URL with some curated YouTube videos just to educate our new employees at Civic Solar and any potential customer if they wanted to watch those videos. So I started curating some learning paths on solaracademy.com. And then,
without the A.
Yeah, without the A. And then somewhere along my 2-year adventures between 2012 and 2014, I told Jacob about this. He's like, dude, I own Solar Academy. And then he told me about his classes, I guess, that he was doing with you back then. And I said, would you be interested in selling? And he said, no, not really. And then we stayed in touch with Jacob. I still message with him here and there and talk to him.
Yeah, tell him I said hi. I haven't talked to him in so long, like over a decade.
Yeah, I talk to him once a year or maybe once every 2 years. So at some point, he called me up and said, hey, are you still interested in this? I'll give it to you. And I'm like, really? So he gave it to me at a really low price. And he knew about my vision of what I wanted to create, which is essentially to make it easy for people to share their knowledge, especially their asymmetric information advantage. The definition of asymmetric information advantage is the definition of profit, is how they taught us at business school, because that's how profit is made in the business world. You know something that others don't, and you create a product or service with that. But the more we share that, the better of a world we create. And the initial instinct of people is to not share that information advantage from a game theory perspective. That's also something they teach us at business school. But I think the more we play that game theory way of living, the more wars we have. And the more we play the game of sharing, givers gain, and we create more things by that knowledge. And that's essentially what I want to do with Solar Academy, is to make it a habit, change that habit of instinctually holding that information advantage to yourself, but make it more of a sharing. I'm not saying share your deepest and darkest secrets or deepest secret sauce to your business, but share more. because the more you share, the more customers it brings, the more partners it brings, the more prospects it brings to you. So I want to make it easy for companies to share these things in a logical and curated manner on a platform. So what we're aspiring to do with Solar Academy, and Nico is a partner of mine in that endeavor,
Nico Johnson. Yep.
Yeah, Nico Johnson. We want to capture, like if you go to a SPI or RE Plus trade show, our Inner Solar, there's tons of conversations happening on the trade show floor, on the booths. Imagine being able to capture 80% of those conversations. And imagine having a place where you can go and search for those conversations. The trade show business is not going to go away. People still will want to connect in person and have that deep human connection, but also having a digital platform that complements that knowledge transfer and have a place where you can search for knowledge, and not just like training knowledge like you are training, but product knowledge, because these companies are constantly, there are thousands of companies innovating products and services all the time in the industry. If they could all put out a press release for every cool innovation they did, we would have so much more data than the 5 vertical media companies that are really covering the industry. And so essentially, I want to create a platform that captures more of this information to ignite more innovation and more commerce, for an opportunity for those looking to do that.
Great. So it sounds like you're using some of your experiences from social media
it's a mesh of
and
my
solar and putting it all together. And then people don't have to go to the trade show and they can learn. And I kind of even look at my podcast like that too. Recently, we had the 50th anniversary party for NorCal Solar, which is an ASUS, American Solar Energy Society chapter. And we posted me interviewing people at the party. And so it was kind of like people being at the party.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're like what you were saying is, if you can go to the trade show, record some things, and then it's like you get in on the conversation, even if you're not there, or maybe you were there and you're just in a different conversation.
Right. But in our current business model at Solar Academy, we don't even go to the trade show. In fact, Nico Johnson's Suncast Media now has a division where I'm actually helping them to create a business where we are creating a marketing agency in a way where we're providing those video capturing capabilities at a trade show. But you don't want to capture all these conversations necessarily at a trade show either. Like, a lot of good conversations happen on Zoom. When a salesperson or a marketing leader or a business leader of any company is talking to any prospect or customer, and if they could just record themselves talking, explaining something really well, and after they hang up the call and thinking to themselves, man, that was really good, I explained that really well in a way that resonated with that customer. Imagine if they could reshare that conversation on their profile page on Solar Academy. That's the user interface and the format of content that we are designing on Solar Academy. Maybe I can give you a quick tour of it if you like, because essentially I would like to be able to promote you and Brian Hayden's Spring and the classes you guys create there on Solar Academy.
Great. Yeah.
So this is how we do it.
Make you an affiliate and you make some money.
Yeah.
So another thing though is mostly my listeners are audio. So they're driving and things like that. So maybe even though you're kind of showing us something, we can kind of make
put a link
audio
to
friendly.
Well, I don't know how to give this view that I'm going to give on my screen share of the Solar Academy website in an audio friendly way, but I guess they can go to solaracademy.com.
So we're at solaracademy.com.
And not the solaracademy.com, which is a separate business that trains salespeople on how to be good residential salespeople, which is a separate business.
Wish they could get rid of it and just have plain old solaracademy.com like you do.
Honestly, I think those things matter not that much. It's the business and the execution and all the other details that matter so much.
Yeah, and so anyway, we're looking at your website and it has solar conversations.
Yeah, so
you have like energy tool base and different conversation. It looks like Zoom calls, I guess, just like us. So we're going to be on there.
Exactly. And what I generally capture is, so for example, let me do a quick search here with Energy Toolbase in the search box, which is a leading software for proposal generation and really capturing the ROI calculations. So what you'll see here, if you go to the Energy Toolbase, so when I did the search, I got a bunch of results. including some solar conversations, which is what we call our episodes, if you will, our podcast-like episodes. But I also have the Energy Toolbase profile page here and other pieces of news and articles that have the word Energy Toolbase in it, and our weekly digest that mention them. But first, I'm going to go to the Energy Toolbase profile page. And what you see here are all the conversations that we capture with them. This is me interviewing various people, leaders from Energy Toolbase. Adam Gerza, who's very active in many areas of the solar industry and a key person at Energy Toolbase since their early days.
So yeah, it looks like a whole bunch of conversations. What do you got about?
Yeah, we
10
talked
or
about
10 or 15 there.
Yeah,
Like
we
that.
have probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 separate conversations talking about what the Inflation Reduction Act means for the solar market, to the economics of residential battery and storage, to NEM3's effect on the CNI solar market, as well as the residential. And then me interviewing their various different product leaders within Energy Toolbase, talking about various modules of the software platform, and their newly launched enterprise services division, and as well as their Acumen EMS module, which is great for forecasting and EMS. And then our last conversation was with their product manager that talks about various solar plus storage
So do you recruit people to be in these conversations, or do they find you, or a little bit of both?
I
Like,
would
say
say
somebody has got a company they're trying to promote, should they call you?
Yeah.
And then how do they get a hold of you? Like, I know you're on LinkedIn.
So if you go to About Us and contact us, there's a team at Solar
Oh,
Academy. That email sends
that's
to
how I
me.
found you, I guess.
And and also they can just find me on LinkedIn, Kerim Baran, or Kerim at solaracademy.com. And
so Kerim Baran, and that's Kerimbaran.
correct. So that's just like one example that I gave you, but we've done this with many companies, including, recently LG Electronics, Dynapower, Lightsource BP, Meyer Burger, Chin Power Systems, and a ton of startups too. Having been a 2-time startup guy, I have a special heart for founders. And so anytime a early stage startup that is making some traction, getting some customers, found their product market fit and a proven MVP, I love to promote them. And we do that almost for free. And let me tell you a little bit about our process. We call it teach, but we're not really teaching in the way you're necessarily teaching. We define teaching as whether you're marketing, selling, or training in the advanced energy industry, you're teaching something to someone. So we make it easy for you to share your wisdom with others. And by putting your content on video on our platform, we help you first distribute that content more easily, also establish trust and credibility by the fact that you're putting your face on video and making some statements publicly. And we also help accelerate your sales cycle. And we talk about why we created Solar Conversation the way we did in a video on this page. I'm on the teach page of Solar Academy now, which is accessible.
I was thinking, I guess what makes what we do a little bit different is you're talking to a lot of people that are manufacturers, they have their specific products and things like that.
Exactly.
And I'm trying to train people to get NABCEP certified. So I'm very unbiased as far as which brand to use, or say microinverters versus string inverters. I just give plus and minuses of both sides.
Yeah.
And I guess you would also, you could do that too, but you have like a manufacturer of one product and then a manufacturer of another product.
So we host all of those companies and products on Solar Academy as well, or we would host all of them as well that want to create content with us on the platform. Essentially, the service we're giving them is we provide them with an easy to accomplish process of creating video content and putting that content out there, not in 5, 10, tens of thousands of dollars, but really on the low end of $1,000 or $2,000 kind of price point per video production piece.
And okay, so you charge the people to be on the website.
We don't really charge to post on the website as much as we charge for providing the services to create the video and then distribute that in various other platforms as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and we talk to these people about their origin stories of their companies and their products. functions and features of the products, case studies, customer testimonials, purpose, culture, values of their company. So we try to organize these conversations about things that they naturally would market about their company. So a little bit more of a marketing oriented content, if you
Great.
will.
And of course, I'm marketing things too. I'm
Yeah.
marketing, get yourself NABCEP certified. And
Sure, absolutely.
but
And
we're marketing
there's
good things, saving the
yeah,
planet, being able to
yeah,
breathe,
yeah,
those are
yeah.
oxygen.
Yeah, and there's definitely a need for certification. So with that in mind, what I would like to ask you is, how did you get into training? Like if I were to do a Solar Academy series on you, and I could do all of these 4 topics in one conversation
Sure.
if you wish, we could make this a longer solar conversation than usual. So we could talk about your origin story. How did you end up being the premier #1 solar technical trainer in the world, if you will? And then what I would also like to dive into a little bit is, what are your key products and services today? What have they been in the past, if you want to go there, or what do you think is coming in the near future? What do we want to talk about that is most relevant to your customers? Maybe talk a little bit about your customers, how they benefit from your services and offerings, how to find you, and what you aspire to become in the next 3, 4, 5 years and more. Yeah, we can talk all about that. And then I can turn that into a solar conversation under Sean White's profile and break it into chapters. Oh, one thing I didn't show you is, we take every conversation, and every conversation we break it into generally 5 to 10 sub chapters, like now YouTube allows you to do, but we also edit them into shorter 2-minute, 5-minute, 10-minute sub chapters within one conversation. And then we transcribe the whole thing with a human, not just AI, but also human corrected final transcription, to make you more findable, more SEOable, and also to create future learning pathways between various chapters and subsections of various different conversations for the future. I would love to take parts of your marketing pitch and create that for you to funnel as much NAPSAP training business to you as you would like.
Great. Awesome. Yeah. So just,
So
like
let's start with the Sean White story.
how it started. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I first saw the sun when I was born. So I knew that was something special. And
do you actually have a memory of that? Seriously?
no, I don't think so. Yeah, probably. I don't know, somewhere in the subconscious. But around the time when my daughter Shia was born, so around 1995, I started hanging out at Jerry Brown's house. And that was between him doing different things. And he had this organization called We the People. And we would go running and do Tai Chi and eat healthy foods and spend the night and all this kind of stuff. And one of the people living there was my good friend, Paul Fenn, and that's how I met him. And he wrote a law called Community Choice Aggregation. And so we're talking somewhere around like 1995, 96 was when this happened. And you've probably heard of CCAs, or Community Choice Aggregation.
Sure.
And so right now, somewhere over 10% of the people in the United States get their electricity through a CCA. And essentially what they're doing is they're decoupling the purchasing of electricity from the wires and distribution and all that. So the utility gets to keep the wires and the distribution and the billing, and then the municipality gets to make a CCA, Community Choice Aggregator, and they purchase the electricity, and it's always greener and cheaper, the electricity with a CCA. And so
Is it always cheaper, or is it the same price sometimes?
Sometimes it's pretty close, and sometimes they're all different, Sometimes you can opt for something that's even greener, like 100% green, and maybe it's even more expensive. But pretty much what happens is when your municipality decides to do a CCA, you're automatically in the CCA, but you can opt out of it and you could still get the non-CCA electricity, but barely anybody would ever opt out of it.
Yeah.
But then the utility spent, I forget if it was like tens of millions of dollars in San Francisco campaigning against this when it first came to California. And my friend Paul Fenn and me holding up signs and things like that. I remember we were just like making signs and, campaigning and meeting with supervisors and things like that. And we won. I remember the newspaper article was like, it's a David and Goliath story
Yeah.
because, it was just like small timers against millions of dollars of utility campaign money. And so I was doing some technical research for him. And you got to remember back then, the solar industry was way different. Even in the year 2000, which was years later, there was a whole gigawatt of solar in the whole world.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would just guess there was probably like a couple hundred megawatts in the whole world back then at that time.
Yeah.
So there's many, many projects that are just the one project is more than that. There's a lot of people
Yeah.
listening right now. They're like, what? I've done a whole bunch more than that.
I want to take us to our
Mm-hmm.
solar charts section for a second on Solar Academy under the Learn tab. We have a solar charts section, and then
Okay.
we have this historic. I only have it going back to 2004. I don't have the
Okay,
prior
yeah.
charts.
And so there's
3.7 gigawatts worldwide.
3.7 gigawatts, 2004. Yeah.
Yeah, and then going to last year or 2022, we have 1,200 gigawatts, adding about probably 300.
That's 2 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're pretty much doubling every two and a half
Yeah, I
years,
think,
right?
what is it? Next year, we're expecting to get 2,000 gigawatts, which is 2 terawatts.
2,000 total, right?
Yeah, 2,000 total. And
Yeah.
then by 2030, they're expecting a terawatt a year.
I think it will be faster than that. Do you know Tony Seba? He talks about this. This has been exponential growth. If you look at these graphs, they've been exponential.
Oh, and by the way, everybody, like I was saying, how most of my podcast is audio. That's how I listen to podcasts, is audio. But I am posting this on YouTube also, and people can go to solarsean.com/podcast and get links to the YouTube or whatever they want.
Perfect. And we'll create a profile as Solar Sean under our training section for Solar Academy. We do have a directory for that.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSean, that's Solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
Anyway, going back to your early 2000s, so the community choice aggregators, which essentially bought electricity from clean energy sources and distributed through a municipality structure.
And they're not getting rid of the utility. The utility does the transmission, distribution, poles and wires, billing, all that kind of stuff. So they're not bankrupting the utility, which is something also that makes it so it doesn't, change too much all at once.
So utility still does the billing. Then where does the CCA in that business model?
So the CCA procures the energy. So they go out there and they
so they insert themselves as a buyer and seller of clean energy to the utility. And they say, if you're going to sell your electrons into our district, you got to give this choice as an opt-in.
Yeah, they go make contracts and all that. Just how a utility goes out and makes contracts and things like that.
Right.
And the utility has to make a profit for shareholders, and the CCA doesn't. I mean, it's more like a sort of a government entity.
Almost,
they're representing the people. In fact, the town that I live in, Orinda, California, they have not gone with the CCA. Perhaps they're getting campaign contributions and things like that. And we're surrounded by cities like Berkeley, Oakland, Lafayette that are all in the CCA, and we're not. So if anybody lives in Orinda, hey, what's up with that? That's one of the things that I ask my city council members about, and they always have some stupid excuse.
But then, one of my recent conversations, which we will publish probably next week or so, was with this company called Amperon out of Houston, Texas. They're in the energy forecasting business with big data, ML, machine learning and AI, ML, high-tech approaches. And I was talking to one of their product managers about why do we pay 2 times more expensive electricity in California than the rest of the nation? I mean, US average is probably 14, 15 cents per kilowatt hour, and we're paying probably 25 to 30 cents on on average in California. And he said it's probably because of these CCA-like mechanisms, because you guys are the people who are innovating on the clean energy front, and there's an extra cost with that.
I think that's totally the opposite, because if you look at the utilities, they're for profit and they have to bring a return on investment to shareholders and all that kind of stuff. So they have to bring the price of electricity up for that. And so if you just look at it, the price of electricity when you have a CCA is less than the utility every time. I've never heard of like the cheapest CCA price for electricity, the one that they opt you into. I've never heard of that being more expensive than the utility. It's always less expensive. So how can you say that makes the price go up? And of course, there's going to be spin doctors that want you to think otherwise, because of course, the utilities, they would rather have control of everything, right?
Right.
So,
I mean, California had three big utilities. They're the largest three monopolies in the nation in the utility business.
And I don't hate the utilities, and I don't blame them, because that's capitalism and I'm a capitalist. And so I could go buy stock in utilities and things like that too. But, you got to look at all the different reasons why electricity is priced higher. So profits, you look in California too, all these wildfires. And I think that's pretty huge. And they had that explosion in San Bruno too, and they have to pay for a lot of this stuff. They pretty much go bankrupt and then somehow get out of it. And another thing too is we do want to have more green electricity. And so we've transitioned faster than any other state. And that's a good thing. And having expensive electricity, if you're not making your own, for me, that's a good thing. I mean, especially, well, I'm in the solar industry. So when the electricity rates go up, great. That's good for business. I'm in the business of making electricity. So if it's more expensive to make electricity with natural gas and coal and things like that, that the utilities are out there selling, then that makes my solar electricity that much better of a deal. And then when you talk about people buying electricity for 30 cents a kilowatt hour, I'm not paying 30 cents a kilowatt hour. I have solar power. I don't know if I'm paying like 10 or 15 cents, probably.
Not even, probably 6 cents.
I mean, actually, for me, it's probably less than that, because I only install used solar on my house that I get essentially for free. And if I do it myself, my labor, or I get friends to help me out, stuff like that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of analysis on that ROI calculations for sure. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to your early 2000 years.
So then I decided to get into solar like full time around 2007. I started just like studying like crazy. And I knew how to study. I'd passed all these boards and all these different things. So I was a really good studier.
Yeah, I've seen
your really good student. And so, and I know how to study. And I was studying like 100 hours a week until I was like, I'm just going to study until I'm in the industry. And then I got a job at Fidelity Roof Company. And the other solar guy at Fidelity Roof Company, it was myself and this guy named Stuart Wentworth, who was trying to start a company called Quick Mount PV that you might have heard of.
We sold them. Yeah, at Civic Solar. We sold a lot of that.
Yeah, and so Quick Mount, actually, they got bought up and he's set for life, did really well. So I was rubbing elbows with the best over there. And my job there didn't last very long, because then I was on LinkedIn. I always recommend people to get on LinkedIn. And somebody was looking for a solar instructor in Philadelphia. And another thing too is I was teaching some classes at community colleges. And what was my qualification? My qualification was the people that were teaching it were not good at it. And so they had me come in and the students were like, we want him. This was called Merritt College in Oakland. And then they heard about that at DVC, a guy named Tom Chatagnier. He heard about me teaching those classes. And then pretty soon I was teaching at Diablo Valley College. And then I got the LinkedIn. Somebody was looking for somebody to teach a week-long class in Philadelphia. And I was like, I'll do it. And they flew me out and I taught my first 40-hour class in Philadelphia in 2008 for Infinite Solar. And then I think probably like a month or two later, that's when I heard from Jacob Travis with the Ontario Solar Academy. And then it just took off. And then pretty soon I was like, I think I didn't show up for work for a few months at the roofing company because I was just traveling. And they knew what I was doing. And of course, I wasn't getting paid for it. And I think I worked at that roofing company from March until December of 2008. just because I got too busy teaching this. And I remember just telling them, like, when they wanted me to teach at Philadelphia, I was like, well, I had to talk to the roofing company and they let me do it. And I told them they had to pay me enough to where if I lost my other job, that I would still be okay. And so I remember getting paid as much in a week that I would get paid in a month.
In
And
the
I always tell
trainings.
people too, once they get their
Yeah.
NABCEP certification or even their associate, so the associate on average, I think doubles people's income. And then getting another certification like the PVIP doubles it again. So 4 times your income. And
Wow.
I'm living proof that that happens. And there's a lot of other people out there too. When you talk to them, like if you talk to somebody that has the associate, say, did that double your income? What did that do for you? And you know what? A year later, it did. And then one of the other certifications, like the PV installation professional, you ask them and it's like, yeah, that doubled it again too. So 2 doublings, that's a quadruple. And then, after that, things just took off. And if you really want to know how to learn something, write a book on it, something like that.
The best way to learn is to teach. The
Yeah, and
best way
so
to learn.
I'm always learning. It's like if
Yeah.
you talk about going to a 4-year degree, it's like I've been doing this for quite a while.
Yeah.
I have like a whole bunch of 4-year degrees equivalents, just learning all of this stuff.
In one of your pages, I also saw you studied at Stanford or taught at Stanford. What was it?
No, I mean, I took some classes when energy storage started to get
class, yeah.
big. I took an online
So,
class
yeah.
for like continuing education through Stanford. I recommend it. It wasn't like the practical type of energy storage that you would learn if you took my classes. It was more like, this is what the anodes and cathodes are made out of, and this is the latest technology that you're going to be seeing 10 years from now and things like that. The guy that taught the class was named Yi Kui. I'm sure his name still is. And he's one of the top experts on this kind of stuff. And so I was putting together my own energy storage classes and I was learning as much as I could from every different angle. And so it was kind of funny too, because I remember one time when I was taking my final exam for that class. So it was a Stanford continuing education class, online final exam.
Yeah.
I did it from the Harvard, I think it's like a student union. You went to Harvard, so you know about it. And so I was teaching a class in Boston and I went over there and I just like hang out with smart people and learn.
Yeah.
So I was sitting in there. And so I was like, yeah, I studied at Harvard, but it was just like, it's kind of a joke because I was just in the student union. I was at Harvard, right?
Yeah. Overrated anyway.
Taking my Stanford class and all that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
But it's kind of neat. I like to go in there and I like colleges.
Yeah.
I like hanging out at colleges.
Yeah. Open-minded people and teaching.
I'm always over near Cal Berkeley going to my favorite salad place called Mezzo. And that's where I meet a lot of people and they're just like full of college students. And I just kind of like that learning vibe that you get.
Yeah. And I'm sure you're getting a ton of pleasure out of teaching as well. What do you find yourself teaching the most and when do you feel yourself most energized? Because something that I feel is I like learning and teaching as well, but if I'm teaching the same thing all the time, over and over again, it gets a little boring for me. And in fact, one of the Energy Toolbase product managers that I interviewed, he used to be a professor of English as a second language. And then he got not so bored, but he got kind of bored of it. That's why he got into coding. And that's how he found his path in career as a coder of software and eventually at Energy Toolbase. And he's been there for 6-7 years plus maybe now. But like, how do you keep that energy going in what you're doing? And how can Solar Academy help direct people? Like one of the thoughts that I was having as you were talking about all this, oh my gosh, Sean knows so much. And I wonder if he gets energized by getting a ton of different types of questions, or does he get more energized by perfecting one course and improving that course over time and just keeping it time over time again?
Yeah, I teach a lot of different types of classes.
Yeah, I've seen that on the HeatSpring. You have, should we show that also as part of our
I have like
conversation?
30 something classes on HeatSpring. And then I teach classes too, and for like online Zoom classes for utility engineers and the Caribbean and energy storage. And there's another company I've been doing a lot of work for out of Singapore, BII World. And what energizes me, I guess, is like a big class. Like those are the best.
Like a big classroom.
Or yeah, just like a lot of people.
I'm going to cut you off for 1 second. For Solar Academy viewers, I want to take us to HeatSpring, which is one of the leading educational platforms for the clean energy industry.
Yeah, and if you go heatspring.com/Sean.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is your profile page as a teacher here, and all the different courses
And
and
so we have
bundles of
bundles that are
courses.
multiple courses, and then
And then you have
32
32.
courses. Yeah.
Wow, this is really cool. Yeah, I remember seeing this. This is
So
very
that's,
cool.
yeah, that's a lot of work putting all that.
And some free courses as well as
Mhm.
a ton of different NAPSAP certification courses. Got it. And so, but what you were saying, what energizes you the most is having a big room of people and
Yeah,
teaching.
yeah. So like
Yeah.
it was the first RE plus, right after COVID. And so we had about 200 people in our PV and the NEC class with myself and Bill Brooks. And that's just super energizing.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm negotiating to teach a class for somebody, like a lot of times companies hire me to come and teach for their company, and they're like, they try to get it for per person. I was like, for me, it's kind of the opposite. It's less painful to have more people.
Yeah,
Or I shouldn't
sure.
even say painful, but it's more fun to have more people. So I don't, charge them more for more people. If anything, I'd want to charge them more for less people, just
Right.
because, if I had a class with 4 people, I end up sitting down and wanting to take a nap. But if I have 200 people and I'm teaching with Bill and we're like telling jokes and everything, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah, and then other things that I love it when great reviews. I get a lot of good reviews on Heat Spring. I love it when somebody's like, yeah, I wouldn't have passed my NAPSEP exam without,
Yeah,
your
Sean's class.
class
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
your book and all that kind of stuff. So that makes me feel good. That really energizes me. I remember one time I was taking a NABCEP exam when they used to do them in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was standing in line or something like that. And it was kind of funny. It was like everybody standing in line was holding my book. And they're like, hey, what are you doing here? You wrote the book. Why are you taking the test? And there's all these different certifications. And so
Yeah.
I forget which one I was
Yeah.
taking, but that energizes me. But it's like, if you want to go and teach a 40-hour class over 5 days, you're going to have some days that are more tiring than other days. You're going to
Yeah.
wake up tired and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
I really try to just have fun and
Yeah.
connect with the students and not
Yeah.
sit down too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I sit down and work on my computer, but I try to, keep the blood flowing and things like that. I try to make it fun. In fact, speaking of Jacob Travis, and the reason that he hired me to teach at the Ontario Solar Academy is because he saw on my resume and on my LinkedIn that I said California Comedy College graduate.
I saw that. Yes. So you did comedy.
Yeah, so I went to, in San Francisco, and I went and took some classes at the California Comedy College, and I just try to have fun. It's like, what better way to learn than to learn while you're having fun? I remember when I was younger, they used to have like laugh and learn traffic school. But I just think like learning and having fun just makes it so much better. And so I try to make learning really fun as
Cool.
much as I can, especially with my heat spring classes.
Yeah.
And so my heat spring classes, we spend like hours and hours and hours sometimes just making 15 minutes worth of video. And I have 5 people that work for me that help edit the videos and things like that, and try to make things fly around on the screen, just make little fun things and say things that are unexpected, that, just to make them fun. And I think that about out of every 500 people, there's one person that gets, is like, come on, we need to get serious here. And so,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the other
They feel
490,
guilty for
they
having
love
fun.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
they love
Yeah.
it. And so I only cater towards those, 99.8% of people,
Got it.
whatever it
Got it.
is. Yeah.
Very cool. For people to get a sense of your style, which one of these courses, free courses on HeatSpring, would you recommend?
The one that's the intro, like there's like an intro class.
Is this Intro to Solar PV Design and Installation Code?
Yeah,
and
that's a free
code?
class.
Yep.
And that
Hour
one.
46
Yeah.
minutes. That one
And
you
I
would
think that it's
recommend?
like 10,000 people have taken that class.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
10,000
and we
people.
redid
Yeah.
it too. So
Yeah.
I'm
Wow.
sure the reviews are even better for the more recent
Yeah.
people that have been taking that class. It
Yeah.
gives people 1 hour of NABCEP credit. And the reason that we put that one together was just to give people an idea of how fun it can be. And, lots of learning. It's sort of like the greatest hits.
And you get it at the conferences, I'm sure. Where else do you find yourself getting large audiences? Is it
Well,
within big utility companies or within big corporations? Do you get to go train or to educate people at Amazon and Google and Facebook? Because they're going to be the biggest consumers of energy, because, computing and IT and AI has been growing at 25% in energy consumption per year for the last 10, 20 years. And they're very soon going to overtake the transportation sector, I hear, in energy consumption. So these guys got to learn. So I'm just curious, like, where would you like to go and how would you like
I
to
would love
train?
to go do that, but I don't think Google or Facebook or anybody like that is probably going to send 200 people to a
Yeah,
class. They
they
might
probably
have,
have a core team of 5, 10 people
and they might
focused
have
on that.
already
Yeah,
been educated before they
sure.
ever went
Yeah,
there, and they still might take some of my classes. They're probably
yeah.
already NABCEP certified before they already got hired, but I'd love to do that. I mean, as you could see, that one class had over 10,000 people taking that class on heat spring. So that's a pretty big crowd. And a lot of times people hire me to go teach classes in different places. It's kind of funny too, living in California, the more solar in this state than any other state.
Yeah,
But I do a lot more in-person classes on the East Coast for
makes
some reason,
sense. Well,
you know.
because they're earlier on in their solar education journey.
And then
Most
plus there's more people, but then there's a whole bunch of states.
Right,
You know.
right. And the customers are generally utility companies, or are they corporations or
All different things. Yeah.
installers, different
Yeah,
players in the
a
value
lot of
chain of
times
the solar
there's
industry?
even people get grants to do workforce development,
Yep,
but it's just all completely different. I've done a bunch of classes for grid alternatives in Washington, D.C.,
yep.
which is
Sure, we
also
know
kind of
them. Yeah,
interesting because their headquarters are a bike ride away from where I am.
yep.
And then I go teaching for them across the other side of the country,
Makes
but that's
sense. Yeah,
just the way
yeah,
the grants work and things like
yeah.
that. I've done a lot of classes for the Carpenters Union.
And you are also now obviously generating good business and income from your online content, if you will, right?
Yeah, do you want to see my tax forms? No, I'm kidding.
No, but I'm interested in understanding how Solar Academy, like what courses are being found most useful and like which ones should we highlight? And also curious as to how you are planning to evolve your business, and is there like what help can Solar Academy or anyone who listens to us in this conversation can bring to you? Like if you could wish for anything from the universe to help
Yeah.
evolve your business, what would you wish for?
So yeah, I would say to get people to sign up for the Heat Spring classes, become a Heat Spring affiliate. I think you
Yep.
probably already are. And then as far as which classes, typically people start off getting the NABCEP associate. So I have a NABCEP
Mhm.
PV associate bootcamp. And a lot of people will also sign up for a combination package, and they would go for their PV installation professional, which is the gold standard NABCEP certification. And that requires 58 hours of training. And the first 18 would be the PV associate class. And so it's got the PV associate plus the 40-hour advanced class.
Yeah.
And those are my two most popular classes. Even though I have 32 classes,
Right.
I would say over half of my business are those two classes. And
So let,
maybe my 30-hour class is another one too.
so I'm
It's
gonna
pretty
go
popular.
here to the Heat Spring Sean White page and scroll
That's
down to the courses.
heatspring.com/Sean. And
Yep.
then you can see just in the courses, so they're not the bundles. It's the one that shows up first
This
is
one,
the
boot camp.
Solar
Yep.
PV Bootcamp NABCET PV Associate Exam Prep.
Yep. That one.
And so
Yep.
that one, we could see that over 3,000 people have taken that
Yep.
class.
Yep.
And then next to it is the 30-hour advanced PV certification training. And
Mm-hmm.
that one will qualify people to take the other certification exams, like
Mm-hmm.
the PV specialist exam. So that there's like the design specialist, commissioning maintenance specialist,
Yep.
um, and there's also an installer specialist. And then to the right of that one, we have the 40-hour advanced PV certification training.
Got it.
And the 30-hour also, a lot of people take that one for continuing education. So if
Yeah.
they already have their NABCEP certification, you go on there, you take that one 30-hour class, and
Mhm.
that covers you for the PVIP continuing education that you have to have every 3 years. And it's the easiest way to do it. And not just the easiest way, it's the funnest way to do it.
Cool. Okay.
Mhm.
And you are basically training people to take the NABCEP certification. Is HeatSpring giving this NABCEP certification, or do they go to somewhere else to get
Yes.
this certification
So
test?
we're an associate provider, and also I'm an associate provider. So sometimes people have me do it in person and they just contact me directly. And
Mhm.
HeatSpring is online. If they want to have me do it in person, they contact me directly. If they want me to do a Zoom class, they contact me directly. And so myself and HeatSpring, we are PV associate providers. And so you take our
Who?
class and
Yep.
then you pay us $150 and
Yep.
then you take the NABCEP associate exam.
Where do you take the NABCEP associate exam?
You take it at home on your own computer most of the time or at a testing center, but almost everybody does it on their own computer with a webcam.
Okay, got it.
All NABCEP exams now are live online proctoring. And so
Wow.
there's somebody sitting there watching you on the webcam.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Mhm.
Very cool.
So that would be for the associate. And then
Yep.
one of the other certification exams, you
Mm-hmm.
don't sign up through the provider. We do provide for all the education requirements, but then you go apply on the NABCEP website. And then if somebody wants to learn more about, what it takes, you can go onto heatspring.com and figure that out. We have lots of different articles about what it takes to comply with the requirements of NABCEP. And I have lots of practice exams too that are very helpful. But another place to go find all the details about NABCEP certification is at the NABCEP certification handbook, and you could find that at nabcep.org.
Got it. Should we talk a little bit about NABCEP and its history and its role in the industry too? Or should we?
NABCEP history, great. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You,
NABCEP's been around for a while somewhere. They started getting more and more popular around, it's hard to say when it started. Even when you go to the NABCEP conference, the people
Mhm.
that started it have different stories, but somewhere around 2000. And I know that Ward Bauer was involved with that. And so Ward Bauer is a really cool guy. He endorsed one of my books. I was on the NABCEP PVIP exam committee with him, but I haven't been on the committee for over 10 years. He's still on the committee. And so he helps write the NABCEP exam questions, but he invented the grid tie inverter in 1977.
Wow.
And Ward said he would get on my podcast. He's kind of retired now. I need to get a hold of him and talk to him about it again.
I wonder
Super,
if
super
this
nice
is one
guy.
of the gentlemen that Jacob told me about that was living in Hawaii.
No, Ward is near Sandia Labs. He worked
Oh,
at
okay.
Sandia Labs in Albuquerque.
Got it.
And like I said, he's retired. He's older than me.
And NABCEP is a nonprofit organization. It stands for North American
North American Board of
Board
Certified Energy
of
Practitioners.
Practitioners.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it would be like a nonprofit 501c3. I
Yep.
believe there's lots of things that are nonprofits that people aren't aware
Yep.
of, like
Yep.
NFPA. They make the National Electrical Code.
Yep.
UL, I believe, is
Yep.
also a
Yep. Yep.
nonprofit, and
Got it.
things like SIA, and of course
Yeah.
ASIS. And I'm
Yep.
even run a nonprofit, and the nonprofit that I run is NorCal Solar, and we are an ASIS chapter. And another thing too that's kind of interesting sometimes is if you wanted to look at the tax forms of a nonprofit and find out how much the person that runs it gets paid, or the highest paid people at the nonprofit,
Is that
they're
public information?
public information, really easy to find. Just go do
Yeah.
a little Google search and you could search the
Yeah.
nonprofit. I believe it's the IRS that publish it, but yeah, you can see their tax forms. Actually, I was there yesterday.
Very cool.
But you can also see that my nonprofit has very low reporting requirements because we make pretty close to zero. And I do that on purpose, even because I don't want to do all the paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
any
no,
entity. Yes. I haven't started and sold to companies. I know. Very cool. So thanks for all this information, Sean. What else can we talk about that would help your business? Like if you could wish for any new business that helps or anything coming your way that would help your new initiatives.
yeah, like I always have these bucket list classes, and I wanted to teach a class in Australia, and I got to do that. So
Yeah.
that was a couple of years ago. And also a couple of years ago, I got to teach a class for Masdar in Abu Dhabi. And I've taught
Yeah.
a number of classes in Dubai. And so that was always kind of fun. Maybe Saudi Arabia. My
Yeah.
favorite place to teach a class or just to do something would be in Antarctica. That's a place that I really want to go to. I
Wow.
want to have some sort of job. The South Pole
Yeah.
would be the best, but I'd go for McMurdo.
When you
And
go to these places, do you actually act as a practitioner too, in terms of an energy professional? Like, do you actually wire up things and install and make?
mostly just for training. Like, I mean, I do have a contractor's license and an
Yeah.
electrician license in California and all that.
Yeah.
And I work with other companies using that license.
Yeah. Do you keep that edge sharp by doing some installations or getting involved in some projects here and there? Or
Yeah.
are you full-time teaching mostly?
Yeah, I'm full-time teaching and I do whatever else I can too.
Okay.
But maybe even double full-time, right? Like everybody in this industry that wants to. I remember we were talking about when I was the earlier days and when I was working with Stuart Wentworth, the founder of QuickMount at the roofing company. And it was strange for me because I've always been an entrepreneur and I had this job that ended it after 8 hours. And I was like, what do I do? Like I didn't really know what to do. It was still sunny outside.
Yeah.
And so then I would put together PowerPoints and pretty soon I was using those PowerPoints. And
Yeah. Very cool.
and so I've always been an entrepreneur and it's just strange working for different people. people, full time. And it's not like I don't work for other people. I'm always on Zoom calls this morning and different Zoom calls trying to figure out scheduling for when I'm going to teach a class in New Jersey and stuff like that. So my wish,
Yeah.
though, is to just have this
Antarctica.
industry grow really
Oh,
a lot, to have a lot of people sign up for my heat spring classes, because that material is already there. And so I spend way more time, like 100 times more time putting together an hour of class than just when I go teach a class for an hour. And I'm always super sharp and rested when I'm putting those together. And I have a lot of people editing those. So online is great. And
yeah.
then with the heat spring classes too, I answer every question every day. Yeah,
You
if
have
somebody
that.
asks a question today, I answer it at least by tomorrow, if not
Got it.
sooner. And it
And
makes it a lot easier too to do it that way, because I don't have like this big backlog of things and people really like it. And it's kind of fun. It's my version of social media. So I
right.
get on there and I just, answer all these questions.
Almost like a ask me anything outlet
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah, and people love the heat spring classes that I put together.
See,
So,
one thought that I had is, and I do know Brian's Heat Spring platform where, because I actually have a course there called Solar Entrepreneurship, where the way I put together my course was, again, it was a curation of several dozen videos and some talking from me, but I do answer some questions there as well sometimes. But I always wonder, someone who's so deep in knowledge like you, if it is the most efficient way to get that knowledge out is like through text-based Q&A. Like, give this a thought. When you are answering those questions on Heat Spring, what if you answered them on video and you talked about them in length, which would be probably more easily consumable and more comprehensive and maybe easier to communicate on video, certain aspects. And then you made 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 minute videos and posted them onto your profile. This could be done on the Heat Spring or Solar Academy.
You know what I would say too, is that 90% of the questions or more I already answer in the class.
Right.
And so when people sign up for the class, they have a whole year to take it. And so if you watch some video 2 weeks ago, you don't remember it sometimes.
Yeah.
Or more likely they're doing like the first couple of videos and they ask some question that's answered 5 videos later or something like that. Yeah. So I do answer it there, but it's always good to repeat things. I mean, with learning, you got to learn things by going over them multiple times. Nobody has a photographic memory. I think that's a myth. And you don't just learn something by one time only.
Right.
You have to do it over and over again. If I wasn't doing all this teaching and I took 5 years off, what would I remember? There'd be a whole lot that I just would be too rusty on.
Makes sense. So anything else we want to talk about?
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and that was fun. Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and really cool that I'm reconnected with solaracademy.com, like blast from the past. It's been great talking to you. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more in the future. And for my podcast listeners, thanks for listening, and go to solarsean.com to find out all my links and connections and everything, where to take these classes. Get a hold of me if somebody wants a class. If somebody is a heat industry person, let me know. We'll put them on the podcast too. I always like learning about things myself, and this is a great way to learn things, is by doing what I'm doing the podcast, learning from you today, just right now. So thanks so much for all that.
Well, thanks, Sean. Thanks for being here and sharing everything you did, and very happy to co-produce this on your Solar Sean and on Solar Academy.
All right. Thanks so much.
Talk to you soon.